All right, we are in Genesis chapter 27 this morning as we work our way verse by verse through the book of Genesis. I hope it's a blessing to you. I will say this as we get started in this chapter this morning. This chapter has been for me one of the most interesting to go through this week and to consider. Part of my preparation for this is I read through it every day, multiple times usually. So by the time I get up here and speak to you, usually through the week I've read through it 20 times or so. I'll just read through it maybe 2 or 3 times a day, which takes 2 minutes. It's not, it sounds like a big number, but really it's not. But I've probably read through it 20 or 30 times by the time I'm up here to teach it. I've considered every word, I've considered every verse. And let me just tell you, there's always a surprise. When you go through it this slow, there's always a surprise. And let me just share with you off the bat what my surprise was reading through it that many times. Here's something I've never really heard talked about, but this is just my takeaway. I wonder if you'll resonate with this as we go through. And that is that out of the 4 characters of the story, so you have Isaac, Rebekah, and the twins, Jacob and Esau. This is just Ken's opinion. I think out of those 4, the one that minded his business the most and did the least wrong was Esau. And I think as I've read this story, I have switched emotionally in this story, having more compassion for Esau than anybody. Esau wanted out of this crazy family. He didn't want anything to do. I think now I'm reading it more, I'm contemplating it. I actually think, remember the part where he's hungry and he sells his birthright? See, a birthright and a blessing are different. We're going to see that today. He sells his birthright and we're like, what a fool. I think the guy saw that as a win-win. Remember what the birthright is. You get a double blessing, a double portion, and you're to take care of the rest of the family with the double portion. He's like, you mean to tell me I get a bowl of soup and don't have to be connected to you? Right? I think Esau wanted out. He married women that were Hittites away from the family. And what was he doing all day? He's at work. He's like, I am going to be hunting all day long. I will not be at home. I think Esau was in the middle of this family and wanted out, man. They did not represent the Lord well. They were conniving. They were all a bunch of liars. They were manipulators. And I'll tell you what, one thing Esau did want is he wanted a blessing from his dad. He wanted a blessing from Isaac. And we're going to see that in the story. So that was my surprise emotional takeaways. I'm contemplating. Sarah, pray for Sarah, because all week I'm like, well, what do you think about this? Do you think they, so her and I have fun all week talking about these chapters. So, you can join us in that conversation. Let me give you the overview real quickly. This is where we're going this morning in the overview. Genesis 27 tells the story of how Jacob, with the help of his mother Rebekah, deceives his father Isaac to steal the blessing intended for his older brother Esau. Isaac, near death, or I could put in parentheses, thinks he's near death. He's actually not. He asks Esau to hunt game and prepare a meal so that he can bestow the blessing. Well, Rebekah overhears this and instructs Jacob to impersonate Esau. Using goat skins to mimic his hairy arms, Jacob successfully does deceive Isaac, receiving the blessing meant for Esau, which includes dominance over his brother and a prosperous life. When Esau returns and discovers the deception, he's brokenhearted and he vows to kill Jacob. Rebekah, fearing for Jacob's life, she overhears this, and she sends him away to her brother in Haran. By the way, we went over this a little quickly, so let me go back. And I was so proud of this picture I wanted you to see. These are all, AI pictures that I type in prompts, and so these are original images just that I'm trying to make with prompts. So in this picture, do you know how confused the AI program was when I said, make the guy serving a bowl to an older guy that's dying, and I said, and put goat hair all over his arms? It was like, you should have seen. I should start saving the options so you can laugh with me along the way. The bowl was a goat head with water in it at one point. I mean, it didn't know what I was asking, but you can see, isn't this a beautiful goat hair coat. So anyways, it's not exactly to the story, but I just thought that was a really funny picture. I thought, close enough. Got some hairy arms there. Anyway, I thought that was funny. I wanted to share with you. Here's our outline for today. It's really just in 4 parts. The first 13 verses we're going to see is Isaac ignores God. I'm going to explain that in a moment. Isaac ignores God, and Rebekah takes matters into her own hands. That's an interesting... you are going to love the psychology and the emotions going on in those first 13 verses, let me tell you. This gets fascinating. The verses 14 through 29 is about Jacob. He lives up to his name. His name is deceiver or supplanter. Literally, remember when he was coming out of the womb, he grabs Esau's heel. He literally, if we were just put it in everyday terminology today, Jacob's name basically means the guy who trips people up. That's basically what his name is. The guy who grabs a foot and throws you off your course. Supplanter. He's a deceiver. And then verses 30 through 40 is Esau is dealing with Jacob's deception. And then lastly, 40 through 46, we'll look at Jacob basically has to run for his life from Esau. Esau had enough at that point. We'll go through all this. Okay, this gets fascinating. Let's go ahead and get started in verse number 1. Isaac ignores God and Rebekah takes matters into her own hands. Let's look at verses 1 through 4. We'll make some comments. Now it came to pass when Isaac was old and his eyes were so dim that he could not see, that he called Esau, his older son, and said to him, "My son." And he answered him and said, "Here I am." Then he said, "Behold, now I am old. I do not know the day of my death. Now therefore, please take your weapons, your quiver and your bow, and go out to the field and hunt game for me, and make me savory food such as I love, and bring it to me that I may eat, that my soul may bless you before I die." Now, by the way, I want to put this in your handouts because this doesn't immediately jump off the page to you because you kind of have to go forward in the story and do math and come back. But let me just tell you what this works out to. We're dealing with Jacob and Esau, and we're dealing with them, trying to receive this blessing from their father, and Rebekah's manipulating Jacob. And you lose this in the story. So let me just tell you the math here. The twins, Jacob and Esau, the twins, they're 77 years old in this story. They're not kids. They're not teenagers. We're dealing with a 77-year-old. 77-year-olds. So when we see in this story that Rebekah is still coddling Jacob, we're going to see things in this story like her feeding him still, her clothing him still. She's making all these plans for him. She's literally helping him get dressed, and she's helping him put food to his mouth. And Esau's the total opposite. Esau's out in the field hunting and totally independent, self-sufficient. So just kind of keep that in mind. We're not, when you learned about this in Sunday school, I almost guarantee the flannel graph you had up on the board were teenagers. These guys are 77. Now, here's another interesting part about what we just read. Isaac, if you remember, was 60 when the twins were born. This puts Isaac at 137 years old in the story. But here's another kicker. Look how this thing starts in verse 1. It says that when Isaac was old, his eyes were dim, he could not see. And remember in verse 2, he says, "Behold, now I'm old. I do not know the day of my death." Isaac thinks he's dying. And you give the blessing just before you die. Here's the kicker. He's 40 years away from dying. He was just losing his eyesight, so he thought he was dying. But he's not near death. That's another crazy part of the story that you kind of miss. Isaac's not dying in this story, but he thinks he's dying because his eyesight. So just a couple of crazy things that are going. So there's emotions going on all over the place. So you have a couple of 77-year-old twins, a 137-year-old dad who's not dying but going blind, thinks he's dying. And he asks his oldest, Esau, to go out and hunt and make him this food that he loves. And then he says in verse 4 that he can bless him before he dies. Now remember, I'm going to get into this later in the passage. We're going to talk about the difference between a blessing and a birthright. They are different. A lot of people conflate those, but actually they're different. I had supporting pastors for all this, but if I do that with everything, we will never get done in the amount of time we have. But if you want to, and by the way, I'll just say this, comment in the video, or somebody can tell me here in person, if you'd like to see a video with outlining the difference, I'd be happy to do that, but I couldn't fit it in this. There's a difference between a birthright and a blessing. He already sold his birthright, which would have given him a double portion physically for financial value. He could have had twice the land. And that's so because the oldest can take care of the family that way. If somebody squanders money, the oldest has double. He can take care of everybody. But the blessing is something different. It's more like a spiritual blessing of prosperity and how the Lord will bless you in this life. That is what Esau was interested in. He didn't care about the double portion to take care of the family. Just Ken theology, I'm not saying this is in the text. Me reading it, I think it's because Esau wanted to separate from this family. They're a bunch of manipulators, they're deceivers, they're liars. And just my thinking, I think Esau wanted out. That's just the way I read it. All right, let's read on, because this gets so interesting. Let's go ahead and read verses 5 through 10. Now Rebekah was listening when Isaac spoke to Esau, his son. And Esau went to the field to hunt game to bring it. So Rebekah spoke to Jacob, her son, saying, hey, indeed, I heard your father speak to Esau, your brother, saying, bring me game and make savory food for me that I may eat and bless you in the presence of the Lord before my death. Now, therefore, my son, obey my voice according to what I command of you. By the way, pause. How old is he? 77 years old. You're going to do what I say, 77-year-old son. Verse 9, go now to the flock, like the ones next door. Where's Esau? Esau's out hunting wild game out in the fields. She said, just go to the flock right next door here. And bring me from there 2 choice kids of goats, and I will make savory food for them for your father, such as he loves. Okay, then you shall take it, verse 10, take it to your father, that he may eat it, that he may bless you before his death. So this is the manipulation of Rebekah. Now, I want to back up and talk about something for a moment that I never hear anybody talk about when they're teaching through this passage. And that is what we usually hear taught here is that Rebekah favors Jacob, which she did, and Rebekah wanted the blessings of Isaac to go to Jacob, which she did. That's usually how we hear it taught. But let me back up for a second, and I want to let's try to put ourselves in Rebekah's shoes for a moment. Rebekah fears the Lord. And the Lord told Rebekah, and by the way, here's another side note we can all talk about. This is all the stuff we can talk about in our cars on the way home. Did Isaac know that the Lord told Rebekah that the older shall serve the younger? Because remember, it was the Lord that told Rebekah. He didn't tell Isaac that. So the question is, does Isaac know that the Lord told Rebekah that the older would serve the younger? Does he know? My guess is he probably did know. We'll see it later in the chapter that he seemed to indicate that he knew. But isn't that all fascinating to think about? So now here's the part we can really think about and chew on. You have a godly wife, I think, who fears the Lord, who knows her husband is going to disobey God. So what does she do? She goes into manipulation mode to deceive, to make sure her husband obeys God. Follow that. Okay? So Rebekah takes it on herself to make sure that she does anything that she needs to do to make sure that her husband, who seems to be infatuated with the oldest, to give the blessing to the right person. So let's back up for a moment. Who did God say the blessing was going to go to? Jacob. Jacob's the youngest. Isaac is planning on blessing Esau, the oldest. Rebekah's like, he's going to disobey the Lord and mess our whole family up. So what does she do? What would you do? What would you do? Well, Rebekah decides to deceive her husband and make her son a liar so that her husband obeys the Lord. Do you start to sense a little bit more of why Esau is out in the field hunting? Esau feels totally at home, not at home. So man, we have a lot to digest here, don't we? So here we have I have this in your handout, a godly woman. I believe Rebekah was a godly woman. But here's my point for us as I have a little bit of an application here in this part of our outline. And that is that a godly woman should not try and cover up for her ungodly husband by making ungodly choices. Let's turn in our Bibles. I don't have this in your on the screen, but let's go to Romans chapter 12. Romans chapter 12. Oh, this gets interesting. Romans chapter 12 and verses 17 through 21. Paul writes this. He says, as a spiritual matter here, he says, as a principle to live by, Romans 12, 17, he says, repay no one evil for evil. Have regard for good things in the sight of all men, and if it is possible, as much as depends on you, live peaceably with all men. Beloved, do not avenge yourselves, but rather give place to wrath. For it is written, vengeance is mine, I will repay, says the Lord. Therefore, if your enemy is hungry, feed him. If he's thirsty, give him a drink. For in doing so, you will heap coals of fire on his head. Do not be overcome by evil, but overcome evil with good. I do not enter into a situation trying to please the Lord and manipulate people around me and lie to people around me so that God might get the glory from my situation. No way. We do not do that as Christians. You say, well, what choice did Rebekah have? Here's what I'm suggesting. What I think Rebekah should have done, I think Rebekah should have had somewhat of a family meeting. Remember, our job as Christians is to speak the truth in love and to bring light to situations. What if Rebekah had had a little family meeting? What if she had requested both her boys sit there? We know Jacob would have listened. Esau, would you please sit for a moment and speak in front of Isaac and be like, hey guys, the Lord told me this. What if she had said that? The Lord shared with me that Jacob, you're the younger, but you're going to get the blessing. Now, I know, Isaac, you want to bless Esau. I know he's the oldest, but listen, this is what the Lord has for us. Let's talk through this with a family. Isaac, I want you to be obedient to the Lord. This is what he's told me. Let's bring this issue before the Lord. Are you each willing to bring this before the Lord with me that we might please him? That's how you deal with family issues. In the light of the truth and in love, we don't go and manipulate our husband because he's ungodly or making a bad decision and try to manipulate the situation. You don't, in other words, you don't fix evil. Paul said, you don't repay evil with evil. We do right. And we do things in love and in light, and we bring darkness into light. That's our job. You know, I was just talking with somebody just a few minutes ago, and this is common. That sometimes we have jobs and we're like the light in a dark place. And it reminds me of this illustration I came up with years ago. And I've heard people say, I don't know, why the Lord has me here. I don't know if I'm supposed to be here. It's a dark. Listen, here's my illustration. Could you imagine how silly it would be if you went up to a construction site and you saw the electrician there and the electrician was wiring a room? And let's say the sun goes down, he's working late trying to get done. So he's got a flashlight up and he's getting some wiring done because he's got to get that checkbox done before the morning. And he might be there with a flashlight. And you walk in the room and you go, what are you doing? And the guy says, well, I'm the electrician. I'm wiring this room so that we can put the light in. And you say, now, how stupid is that? You mean to tell me you're wiring this room for a light? Look how dark it is in here. What on earth would you want to bring a light into a room that's so dark? Now, does that make any sense to you at all? You would say that's the silliest observation in the whole world. Of course they're wiring it for light because it's dark. We can figure that out. But Lord, why do you have me in this family that's so dark? Lord, why do you have me? Does it make more sense? Because we're the light. Jesus has called us to be light as he is light. And this is how we're supposed to handle family issues as well. with love and with light, not manipulation. So that's my suggestion in this situation. That's what Rebekah should have done. By the way, one more point before we move on to the next, and that is Rebekah should have brought light to the situation. I put this in your handout. Think Zipporah. Do you know who Zipporah is? Zipporah is the wife of Moses. Now, Moses didn't marry a Hebrew. So Zipporah is outside of that faith. But Moses marries her, and Moses does not circumcise his son. And so he's living in blatant sin. Now, Moses gets sick because of this. Moses is on his way out. Moses is about to die. And his wife, who's not from this faith, finds out about this. Her name's Zipporah. You know what she does? She goes and circumcises her child because Moses wasn't willing to do it. And she takes the foreskin of the child and throws it at Moses. And she says, "You're a bloody man. Look what you made me do." And because of her obedience, she's like, "You haven't obeyed the Lord?" And because of her obedience, Moses begins to heal, and God spared his life due to Zipporah's obedience. I like Zipporah in that situation. It's like, hey, you're not going to obey the Lord? Are you kidding me? You're on your deathbed? I'll do it, you bloody man. Like, you're not going to take care of our family? Really? But she may have done it in anger, but you know what? She did it in light. She exposed his sin. Maybe you could do it in a slightly better way than she did it, but the point is, she was straight. I like her straightforwardness. One of the things that being from the north, I'm northwest, I'm from Seattle, and then coming to the south, I'll tell you one of the biggest differences is when you're from the north, people will basically to your face not be very nice. But if they become your friend, they'll die for you. Whereas in the South, it's almost the exact opposite. Here, people are so kind to you, to your face, but they'll stab you in the back in lickety-split. At least in Seattle, I knew not to trust anybody. Here you're like, oh, everybody's so kind. And then they're like, I remember when I was in Bible college, there was a professor that said, in ministry, he said, be careful when people hug you, because they may just be clearing a spot for the knife. I always remember that, like, oh, well, that's very encouraging. Thank you for your positive outlook, Anyways, let's move on. Verses, by the way, you can read about Zipporah, Exodus 4, 21 through 26. I have that in your handout if you'd like to see that story there. 11 through 13, and Jacob said to Rebekah, his mother, look, Esau, my brother, is a hairy man, and I am a smooth-skinned man. Perhaps my father will feel me, and I shall seem to be a deceiver to him, and I shall bring a curse on myself and not a blessing. But his mother said something very stupid to him. Rebekah said, let your curse be on me, my son. Only obey my voice and go get them for me. I think there's multiple issues going on in Rebekah's heart here. I think she was saying these things that were pretty extreme. This is a very extreme thing to say. Oh, you're off the hook. All the curses go on me. But why was she being so extreme? I have in your handout. I think because she was so confident that she had an ace up her sleeve. What's the ace up her sleeve? She knew that God wanted Jacob to receive the blessing. So rather than having the open family meeting like I'm suggesting, Rebekah's manipulating and Jacob's like, what if this doesn't work? And she's like, oh, trust me. This is going to work. Why? Because God already told her that he wanted to bless Jacob. So she's saying, don't worry about a curse. In fact, just put it on me. You know what this reminded me of? I'm going to turn to Matthew 27 real quickly and read this for you. Matthew 27, 25. It reminded me of the situation we see of Barabbas and Jesus. And Pilate asked the questions, what do we do with Barabbas? They said, set him free. What do we do with Jesus? You remember? Crucify him. Well, in Matthew chapter 27, 25, they kind of sound like Rebekah here. They're very confident they made the right decision. It says this, and all the people answered and said, his blood be on us. And as if that's not dumb enough, they added one more huge category, and on our children. Now, why would they make such a foolish statement? Because they were confident they were right. You would never make such a claim or statement if you didn't know for sure you were right. You know what's better than being sure you're right? Obeying the Lord. Obey the Lord. That's better than being confident you're right. Just obey him. You say, well, isn't that kind of the same thing? Not at all. Because I can be unaware, I can be ignorant of a situation and just say, Lord, I seek your face in this. I want to be humble before you. And I want to obey you in all things that I do. I'm not sure. I say this all the time. Sarah and I always talk about this. I'm not sure what's right in this situation. Like, I want to do it. I'm not sure what you ever been there? I'm not sure what the right choice is. But Lord, man, as best as I know how, I want to be humble before you and hear your voice. Will you speak to me? I'd rather be obedient than know for sure I'm right. You know who knows for sure they're right? Cults. Cults know for sure they're right. I'd rather pursue after truth and be a little unsure and live my life dependent on the Holy Spirit than to be absolutely confident and make the wrong decision. Rebekah was so sure she's right. She said, oh, that's easy. I can fix that. I'll take all your curse on myself. Verse 14. We enter in our second section here. Jacob lives up to his name for supplanter, deceiver. And okay, so the 77-year-old, I'm going to say that so we remember, the 77-year-old, and he went and got them and brought them to his mother. Where did he go, by the way? Where did he just go? Right next to the house. He went into where their flock were. Where's Esau right now? He's out in the middle of hee-haw land, in the middle of the fields, and he's looking for wild game. Where did Jacob just go? Right next to the house. He went and brought them to his mother, and his mother made savory food, such as his father loved. Rebekah took the choice clothes of her elder son Esau, which were in with her in the house, and she, look at this, 77-year-old man, and she put them on Jacob, her younger son. The emphasis on younger. I mean, Moses is hammering this point so you can see that this is the younger son. And by the way, she treated him like a little toddler. The coddling, let me clothe you. I will take care of you. I'll take the blame for this. Verse number 16. And she put the skins of the kids of the goats on his hands and on the smooth part of his neck. Oh, there, baby. I got you, sweetie. Mommy will dress you. 77. And she gave the savory food and the bread which she had prepared into the hand of her son Jacob. Okay, now this is the food you take to daddy, okay? Okay, this is the food. I'll put it in your hand. I already did all the work for you. It's sick. Jacob is beyond coddled. She's dressing him. She's preparing the food for him. Where's Esau? Out in the field. 18 to 20. So he went to his father and said, Oh, my father. I mean, my father. I mean, my father. He's impersonating Esau. And he said, here I am. Who are you, my son? Isaac's radar immediately. You see it in the first verse. He immediately started going off. He's going, that doesn't sound right. Whose voice is that? So I know that Jacob went in there and was like, oh, my father. Who are you, my son? You see it? He only has 2 kids. He's got 2 sons. Jacob said to his father, I'm Esau, your firstborn. I have done just as you told me. Please arise and sit and eat of my game, that your soul may bless me. Well, we got some questions here, buddy. Primarily, here's the question. Isaac said to his son, how is it that you found it so quickly, my son? Remember where he went? Right next to the house. Where was he supposed to go? Out in the fields. How did you find it so quick? You already prepared it? How did you find it so quickly, my son? Look at what the deceiver says. Because the Lord, your God, brought it to me. He uses the Lord's name in vain. He, at this point, is saying, the Lord must have blessed. I went out in the fields and it was just, there it was. I mean, it was, your Yahweh that you follow. I mean, he must have provided it for me. Absolutely using the Lord's name in vain in a totally empty way. What really happened? He went next door and got a flock they already had. I have in your handout here, I said Isaac was immediately unsure. And he allowed, this is what's so important. I really want to make sure this makes sense to us. Isaac allowed his senses to overrule the words of God. Now, I believe later, I think probably there was a time when Rebekah shared with Isaac that the older was to serve the younger. I believe that because I'll show you that later in the chapter. If I'm right in that, if I'm wrong in that, then discard this point. But if I'm right in that, which I think I am, then that means that Isaac preferred to be obedient to his emotions and his senses. Right? Let me feel those hairy arms, and well, the voice is kind of off, but I felt the hairy arms, and boy, those clothes that you're putting on, whew, I can really smell the outdoors from that. And okay, let's go along with this, rather than just listening to the words of God. And by the way, can I just say what I just talked about right there? Sadly, is how a lot of churches are run this morning. I want to have a feel-good emotional message. And by the way, isn't this doctrine just make you feel so wonderful? Amen. Isn't the Lord strong enough to do this, folks? Amen. Oh, can't he do this in your life? Amen. And we're worked up because it feels good. But you know what we're supposed to do? I would rather listen to the words of God than be tricked by my own senses and emotions. Isaac's problem here was he knew something was the words of God, but he would rather go by how he was feeling at the time. And by the way, isn't that a good life lesson? Don't be tricked by your senses and your emotions. Forget all of that. Go by the words of God, no matter how they make you feel. I always use this when I'm teaching like Sunday school with little kids. This works good with adults too. But I like to teach this to kids because if you can get this when you're a kid, you'll save yourself heartache. I always draw at the beginning, I want to draw the beginning of a train and then a second boxcar of that train. And there's two pictures. The top one is the way that Satan wants us to live. And in that first train, I draw that out with the steam coming up and the railroad tracks going. In that first car right there, I just draw emotions. That's the first car. This is Satan's plan for our life. And then there's a train that follows out. It's pulling another boxcar. And that second boxcar, Satan's plan for our life, is knowledge. And then God's plan is opposite. The first train is knowledge, and it pulls emotions behind it. Why? Because Satan is, think Las Vegas. Satan is bright lights, awesome deals, fun, emotions. Then the knowledge of, I shouldn't have gone there last night. The emotions the knowledge of, I shouldn't have done that, follow emotions in Satan's plan. Well, I don't know, I was just so angry, so I hit him. Emotions. I shouldn't have done that. Why did that happen? Knowledge follows emotion. God's plan is totally backwards. That's when a husband and wife hold hands and make tough decisions because God said to do something, even though it hurts. And we do the right thing based on what God said to do. And you drag your emotions along that don't want to follow, but they're the second boxcar. They get dragged along in God's plan. But you have the knowledge of what God said to do. You do it first, even though knowledge is leading emotions. Emotions doesn't want to do that. But in God's plan, emotions are led. And then you say, oh, I'm so glad that I listened to the Lord. Oh, look how it turned out. I'm so glad that I listened to the Lord. I didn't want to at first, but now I'm so thankful. And all of the emotions follow the knowledge part. That's what we're seeing in this story so clearly. Let's go ahead and read in verse number 21. And Isaac said to Jacob, come nearer that I may feel you, my son, whether you are really my son or not. He is not buying this for 1 second, is he? Doesn't sound like he's bought into it. So Jacob went near to Isaac, his father. He felt him and said, the voice is Jacob's voice, but his hands are of the hands of Esau. I mean, come on now. He is not buying it for 1 second. He did not recognize him because his hands were very hairy like his brother Esau's hands, so he blessed him. And then he said, are you really my son, Esau? Now, by the way, look at the end of verse number 23. It says, so he blessed him. after he blesses him, he says, "Are you really my son Esau?" After the blessing asked that. He says, "I am." And he said, "Okay, bring it near me and I'll eat of my son's game so that my soul may bless you." So he brought it near to him. He ate, and he brought him wine, and he drank. Then his father Isaac said to him, "Come near now, kiss me, my son." He came near and kissed him, and he smelled the smell of his clothing and blessed him. "Surely the smell of my son is like the smell of the field which the Lord has blessed." Oh, Rebekah, you are so good. Rebekah knew that the clothing in the closet had two different smells. Esau smelled like a locker room, and Jacob smelled like Giorgio Armani. Two different smells. A locker room of BO and Giorgio Armani. Whatever the male version of Chanel number 5 is, right? And so he comes in, he's like, "I don't know, man, you sound like Jacob, but I gotta tell you one thing you can't duplicate. You really smell like Esau." And I can imagine Rebekah behind the wall. Yes, I knew that was gonna kill, right? Unbelievable. Verse 28 and 29, verse 28. "Therefore, may God give you of the dew of heaven." And remember these words, they're going to come into play in a little bit. "May God give you of the dew of heaven, of the fatness of the earth, and plenty of grain and wine. Let the people serve you, and the nations bow down to you. Be master over your brethren. Let your mother's son bow down to you. Cursed be everyone who curses you, and blessed be those who bless you." Kind of reminds you of the blessings God gave to Abraham in chapter 12. Now, here's what's interesting. This is the person that the Lord wanted to receive the blessing, but it was done in such a terrible way. Such a terrible way. They could have all been obedient to the Lord, but they did it in this terrible way. But he allowed his senses to overrule the words of God. And by the way, he did seem to know verse 40. Well, I'll go down and show you that at the end of this next section. So he receives the blessings of his father. Now, verses 30 through 40, Esau's dealing with Jacob's deception. Now it happened as soon as Isaac had finished blessing Jacob, and Jacob had scarcely gone out from the presence of Isaac his father, that Esau his brother came in from his hunting. Let's hit pause in the story and let me explain something real quickly here. In the Hebrew way of telling a story, many times they would use a literary structure or literary tactic, if you want to call it that. And when they would tell a story, they would say, "This person, this happened." And then it would say something like, "And while he was yet speaking, this happened." Or they would use the words "immediately," and then this happened. "Immediately this happened." In this sense, Moses is highlighting that style of telling a story by saying that as soon as this happened and Jacob left, immediately, basically, Esau comes in from hunting. But remember, one of the reasons why Isaac was confused is because he thought that Esau came in so early from hunting, remember? So I don't think that this is just know that when we see this in the Bible, there could be room for hours to go by here. But in the Hebrew style of telling stories, like remember, I have two examples here. Remember in Job, and while he was yet speaking, and then he says something, and while he was yet speaking, something, and then while he was yet speaking, you're like, wow. That was a way of keeping the story going. It's really a literature or literary way of the author to tell you, here's the next important part of the story. I'm not going to take the time to do this because we don't have the time. But if you look at the first 3 chapters of Mark, when Mark is writing his biography on Jesus, it says this happened and immediately they dropped their nets, right? 3 verses later. And immediately Jesus appeared to them 3 verses later. And immediately, look at the word immediately in the first 3 chapters of Mark. It's a style of telling a story. And what the author is doing is they are highlighting the next important part of the story. And that's why the word immediately. It's sometimes not used as you and I would, in the sense that I stubbed my toe and immediately it hurt, right? That's how we use the word immediately. And so just a little side note there. So Esau comes in from hunting. Jacob exits stage right. Esau enters stage left. Verse 31, and he also made a savory food and brought it to his father and said, "Father, let my father arise and eat his son's game that your soul may bless me." "I got it, Dad. I'm here. I made it." What? Isaac said to him, who are you? He said, I'm your son, your firstborn Esau. Then Isaac trembled exceedingly and said, where's the one who hunted the game and brought it to me? I ate all of it before you came, and I've blessed him, and indeed he shall be blessed. When Esau heard the words of his father, he cried with an exceedingly great cry and bitter cry, and said to his father, well, bless me also, O my father. This is the only thing he cared about in the whole world. He wanted the blessings from his dad. That's what he's been working for. But he said, your brother came, and with deceit, he's taken your blessing away. Are you kidding me? So I'm out in the fields every day trying to avoid the madness of this family while mom is dressing Jacob, while mommy is feeding Jacob, while he's getting a pat on the back his whole life. He has the double portion already. And now you're telling me he's taken my blessing from my dad? Esau has had it with this family. At this point of your handout, I'll just say it very simply. The birthright, think of it in these terms. It's physical, legal, financial. Double portions of all those things to take care of the rest of the family. I don't think Esau valued it as much as a bowl of soup. I think he saw that as a good deal. I don't have to take care of you and I get soup. Win-win. Think of the blessing in these sense. It's spiritual. Remember what he just said? You're going to be blessed of the land. You're blessed physically, but you're blessed in the way that the Lord is blessing in a spiritual sense. That's what Esau was after. Verses 36 through 40. And Esau said, well, is he not rightly named Jacob? I'll tell you one thing you and mom did right, Dad. Let me tell you one thing you did right. Is you nailed his name. I got to tell you that. I mean, when you named him Jacob, boy, you guys nailed that one. For he has supplanted me these 2 times. He took away my birthright, and now look, he's taken away my blessing. Let me pause real quick. That's another one of the reasons I know that there's 2 separate ideas here. People that conflate these two, they'll have to deal with this verse, that Esau was mad on 2 accounts. The birthright and the blessing were separate in Esau's mind, so they're separate in my mind as well. He said, have you not reserved a blessing for me? Isaac answered and said to Esau, indeed, I've made him your master, and all his brethren I have given to him as servants. I mean, with the grain and the wine, I've sustained him. What shall I now do for you, my son? Esau said to his father, have you only one blessing, my father? I mean, bless me also. Oh, my father. Esau lifted up his voice and he wept. Verse 39, then Isaac, his father, answered and said to him, he said, okay, and here's the blessing. And I'm going to make comment after this because it's really important. But here's this blessing. He said, behold, your dwelling shall be of the fatness of the earth and the dew of heaven from above. By your sword you shall live. You shall serve your brother. It shall come to pass when you become restless that you shall break his yoke from your neck. Now, I want to point your attention to the board here because there's something that's important to understand the story. And that is that there's really, really funny wording in the Hebrew on this. And, I don't want to always bring up Hebrew and Greek stuff, but this is one of those times where it's just really weird wording, okay? In your Bible, I'm reading from the New King James on the board, and then if you read this or the King James, it'll say something like, behold, your dwelling shall be of the fatness of the earth and of the dew of heaven. If you look in the Septuagint, we all, I think, know what that is. And if you look at any other translation, they try to make this make more sense. And this is usually translated in English as this way. Behold, your dwelling shall be away from, instead of. When we think of, we mean in close proximity, so it kind of sounds like that. But if you could, this will help you to understand his blessing wasn't that you're going to be of, like, live off of, but rather away from. So this is really what he's saying. He's saying, behold, your dwelling shall be away from the fatness of the earth and away from the dew of heaven. Notice there's a comma here, and of the dew of heaven. No, there's a period there, but there's one more thought to this blessing, and that is, in contrast to being away from the blessings of the earth, in contrast to that, it's by your sword you shall live. So you can either live by the land or by sword. In other words, I can be blessed on the land that I live on, or I'm going to go take it by force. In this sense, you're going to be blessed by sword. In other words, you have to fight for everything you get. You're going to have to crawl and scratch your way through life. You shall serve your brother, and it shall come to pass. Here's the rest of the blessing. When you get sick of it enough, when you become restless, when you get sick of it and you've had enough, you're going to have to fight to break free from your brother. Then you shall break his yoke from your neck. Here's your blessing. You're not going to be blessed, and you're going to have to scratch and crawl your way through life. And by your sword alone, you'll live. And when you're sick of it enough, you have to fight your brother to break free from this family. Thanks, Dad. Wow, wow, wow. Verse number 41. Esau hated Jacob. Can you see why now a little bit? Do you see, as I've really thought through the story this week, I could not believe my heart was going in the direction of Esau. Didn't see that coming. Esau hated Jacob because of the blessing with which his father blessed him. Esau said in his heart, the days of mourning my father are at hand. They're 40 years early. And then I will kill my brother Jacob. Oh, guess who has the best hearing in the family? Rebekah has the best hearing in the family. The words of her older son were told to Rebekah. And so she sent and called Jacob, her younger son, and said, surely your brother Esau comforts himself concerning you by intending to kill you. Covering for Jacob. Verse 43, now therefore, my son, obey my voice. Arise, flee to my brother Laban in Haran. Stay with him a few days until your brother's fury turns away. Let's let all this blow off, man. You got to go out. You got to get away from this place, at least for a couple days. Verse 45, until your brother's anger turns away from you and he forgets what you've done to him. He'll forget. It's not a big deal. How many think Esau will forget? He's not going to forget. Rebekah so misjudges how much this has emotionally damaged Esau, that she thinks, give him a couple of days. I mean, talk about being out of touch with your family. Then I will send and bring you from there. Why should I bereave also of both of you in one day? In other words, at least you'll be safe. I don't want anything to happen to you, my son. Yes, mommy. It's really an unhealthy relationship. Rebekah is downplaying in your handout. Rebekah is downplaying the seriousness of Esau's hurt and still protecting Jacob. Last verse in the chapter says this. Rebekah says to Isaac, here's the one thing she concludes this chapter with. Moses wants to make sure you know where Rebekah's mind is at. She says, I'm weary of my life. Oh, because you're a conniving liar? Oh, no. I'm weary of my life because of the daughters of Heth. This is Esau's wives. If Jacob takes a wife of the daughters of Heth, like these who are the daughters of the land, what good will my life be to me? In other words, Isaac, can I talk to you for a second? But I got to tell you something. I just want you to know, the worst part of my life is who Esau married. And I got to tell you something. If Jacob turns out as bad as Esau, I'll have nothing left to live for. That's what she said at the end of this chapter? I mean, that is so manipulative that she is, through all of what she has done, she is trying to throw off Isaac by getting him to focus on the faults of Esau. That's the family we're dealing with. Remember, guys, as we're going through this story, Jacob's name is changed to Israel. Right now, when we see him go to Haran, we're about to get into the part of the story of the Rachel story. Remember that story? The 7 years working? We're getting into that part of the story right now. Oh, it is so amazing. Let me give you some life application, and then we'll be through. I know we're a little long today. I got so much out of this week, and here's what I got out of it. All we can do is make godly personal choices. We cannot control the decisions which others make. We are not to manipulate others in an attempt to make good things happen. We are to speak the truth in love and let the light of loving truth shine in our families. I want to say this twice. I am not emotionally or spiritually responsible for the ungodly decisions of my friends or family. We need to hear that. I am not emotionally or spiritually responsible for the ungodly decisions of my friends or family. May the Lord God be pleased with my personal choices before him. And I thought of this as one of my favorite verses in all the Bible, came to my mind after this week. Psalm 37:23 says this, "The steps of a good man are ordered by the Lord, and he delights in his ways." Genesis 27. Whoa. Amazing chapter. I hope you were blessed by that. So much to learn from Genesis 27. And next time we come together, we'll be in Genesis chapter 28.